And today I'm going to talk about the faculty letter of recommendation for the health sciences. Now, I feel that I can give some insight into this. I teach mostly upper division classes for genetics and biochemistry and molecular biology majors. These majors have a lot of pre-health students, and I'm going to talk about more from a personal perspective of how I go about writing letters of recommendation. So the overview of my talk is how do you get to know professors to ask them for a letter of recommendation. Make sure that that letter will attest to your best qualities. And finally, if a professor declines to write a letter, what do you do? I'd like to speak for about a half an hour, and then following, if you have questions, you can come up to the mic and I can answer them. Okay, so first, getting to know your professors. There are a couple of ways that students can behave that really help me in getting to know them. First, I teach in big lecture halls, sometimes with over 200 students. And to me, it really helps when there are students who are sitting in the first couple rows of the class. I can see their faces, I can see how they respond to the material that I'm presenting. I can kind of tell if they're getting it or if they're confused. So I can get to, at least so that I can recognize those students outside of the classroom. So that's kind of a first thing. One thing is just practical as well for the student's point of view is I feel like if you are in the first couple rows, then you are there really focused and the material is right there coming at you. If you're sitting in the back couple of rows in a big lecture hall, there are a lot of distractions. Those can include students looking up the professor's notes on Wikipedia. They could be looking at Facebook. So there, I think, are a lot of reasons why you want to avoid sitting in the back of the classroom. It's also important to ask questions during the lectures. That's another way that professors can get to know you. You want to be careful not to ask too many questions because occasionally I will throw out a lot of open-ended questions or just questions with direct answers that I'm hoping the students will respond to. And there's always a student that every question, they raise their hands. And I know that you know the material and you have to give other students a chance as well. But that is another way that I can get to know you. The third way, which I guess the second way here, is to come to office hours. Now, I think this is one of the most underutilized services that we can give you at the university. If I have a class with 200 students in it, it's oftentimes the first couple of office hours I hold, no one comes. And people start coming in the closer the first midterm comes, and then people have questions about the midterm. And in those situations, it's kind of hard for me to get to know you. But if you come to office hours regularly and you ask questions that are informed, like you have gone over the notes and you have some clarification questions, then I get to know a little bit better of how you think. Sometimes a further discussion will come out of a question. I'll have some, it'll remind me of some paper I read that week, and so I can share something with the students kind of in an impromptu way. I think that one of the reasons students don't come to office hours is they feel like they don't have a question to ask. But that's okay too, because they can come to the office hours and there will likely be other students, hopefully, not those first couple of weeks, but hopefully there will be other students there that will be asking questions, and so you can kind of piggyback on those. So I know the biggest fear would be for you to go to office hours without a question, and you are the only one that shows up. So don't despair if this happens, it's okay. So I think that most professors can kind of take this and run with it. They can start to engage you in conversation, like if you feel like you're not doing well in the class. Personally, I would try to ask the student, what are your study habits? What kind of extracurricular things are competing with studying? What are some factors that maybe you could change to be doing better in the class? It also gives a chance that if you're the only one there, that we can get to know each other a little bit. And oftentimes I'll have conversations they go on at quite length about, what are your career goals, your aspirations, where did you grow up, just I get to know you from those situations. And in fact, there are a number of times where I've gotten to know students well enough that I want them to join my lab and do research in my lab. And that's happened on a couple of occasions. And I feel really lucky that I've gotten to know a couple students that way. Another way you can ask professors for further reading on topics that were presented in class. So let's say I'm talking about something about DNA replication, and you want to know more, like what are some of the really current topics going on, or how is it related to human health or something. We can talk about it, and hopefully I can direct you to some articles that you might want to look at, and we could even talk about afterwards. So that's a good kind of conversation starter, is wanting to know more information that hopefully I can give to you. Okay, related to that is asking professors about their research. So professors always love to talk about their research. And that's a great way to kind of get professors talking. But you want to do that with some caution, because the professors, you will be watching you to see, are you paying attention? Are you nodding? Are you asking questions? Or are you just kind of staring at them while they talk? So the more engaged you can be with a professor, the more back and forth and conversations is a very good way to get to know them. The best way you're going to know a professor is through an internship, particularly a research internship, because that's a long-lasting relationship. Usually I will see how well do you work independently in the lab? How well do you understand the project that you're working on? What is your work ethic? What are your presentations? What are your writing skills, your presentation skills? So there's a lot that I can learn about you from just working in my lab. Even if I'm not at the bench pipetting with you, I still know how things are going in the lab. So that's another way. You can also, it's fine for a postdoc or a graduate student that you're working with, write a joint letter with me, if you feel that person knows you better on a day-to-day basis. And I can also talk to that person. So the internship is probably one of the best ways to know a professor to write you a letter of recommendation. Okay, so how do you go about asking for the letter? First, you want to choose the right professor, and I'll go through a couple of ways you might want to do that. Once you choose your professor, you want to contact them and schedule a meeting to discuss writing the letter. And during this meeting, you should be prepared to share some information about yourself, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And you should also be prepared to give instructions to the professor of how they can submit the letter of recommendation. Okay, choosing the right professor. So if you only know a professor from a class, preferably you'll choose one where you got an A in the class. That would be the best. One where you went to office hours, doing those things that I discussed about getting to know your professor. So that's going to be ideal person to choose to ask. The second is a professor with whom you've worked on an independent project, like maybe you have worked on a video. I had a student, we worked together on she did all the work, but to make a claymation type of video showing initiation of protein synthesis. And she put it on YouTube, and it has so many hits now. So that was a really satisfying kind of way I interacted with this student and got to know her better. And then of course, the principal investigator, the PI. Your PI is the person who is running the lab, who is usually a professor, and then that would be the person that you would want to choose. You have to be really careful about accepting positions in research laboratories, because a professor can pretty much smell a mile away the pre-med student who is just looking to get some something to add to their resume. If you are going to get a letter from your PI, you want that letter to say that you are the driver of your project, that you do that extra mile to try to get in on weekends and work and move your project forward. And I'm going to give a number of examples of excerpts from letters from these different types of professors and what kinds of things that they can, that at least I have written for students. Okay, so now we want to contact the professor. So this is an example of a letter that a student wrote me not too long ago who wanted to ask me for a letter of recommendation. And so the letter was very polite, and it had a number of aspects of it which let me know exactly what he was looking for. Okay, so first he reminded me who he was. He took 2 classes from me, and both of these were pretty big classes. So he reminded me which classes those were, and that he got an A in both of them. He also told me that he recently graduated with a degree in genetics. And so, okay, and so, oh yes, I remember him, I remember his name, and he seems like someone that, yes, I would like to write a letter for him. Okay, he next told me what impact I had on him as a student. So there was a particular topic in class he was interested in was telomeres, how the ends of chromosomes are maintained, how their length is maintained. And it turns out that he went from that knowledge in class, and he actually went and worked at a research lab at Stanford, where he's working on the telomerase, expression of the telomerase enzyme. So this tells me that he's gone beyond the coursework and is actually working in this field in a lab. And so then he tells me why he chose me, and he's interested in schools that are looking for applicants who have an interest in research. And so obviously from his letter, he does. So there's a lot that already I know that I could write a letter about him. And finally, he would like to schedule a meeting to talk about the letter of recommendation. And that's very important. I usually don't write letters for students unless I can talk to them and I can find out why do they want to go to medical school or any kind of professional school, which this is relevant to any of those. Okay, so the best way to schedule a meeting is to offer several times where you can meet. You can ask what materials you should bring. Sometimes a professor would like it if you brought a transcript, a copy of your transcript, or perhaps a draft of your personal statement, something that they can kind of work off of after they're finished talking to you. But you and if you can't make the meeting, of course, just try to let the professor know well in advance. And of course, things happen if you miss the meeting. But just everything, however you act with the professor, you should be very polite, okay? Because this can turn people off. All right, so you want to be prepared to share information about yourself. So the professor may want to know, what is your GPA? What are your MCAT scores? Maybe they just want to get an idea of how competitive you are for getting into programs. It's not necessarily it's going to influence how they write the letters of recommendation, and many people won't. They might want to use it as take it in an advising role, saying, well, I don't know if you're going to be so competitive. What other careers have you been considering? They'll expect you to talk about why you choose your medicine for your career. Some people have specific instances in their lives. They had a close relative who died from cancer, and they've wanted to work on cancer, become an oncologist. Some people just want to be a pediatrician for some reasons. So it's nice to have an idea of why the student wants to be a professor. To be a medical student or a doctor. And it's a good time to kind of open up and perhaps even share some significant obstacles that you have overcome in your life. Or maybe if you are first from your family to attend college, if you're an underrepresented minority, that you can say it then, or it is always on the application, you could check that. But there are people who have have very significant events that have happened to them that have influenced them and their decisions to become doctors. So that's a good time to share that information. Not that I'm going to put that in the letter, but it just gives me, it shows me a little bit about your character. So this first excerpt from a letter is just this. This is a student that I mostly knew from my class. He did do an extra credit assignment with me. But I talked to him, and I didn't know any of this about him until we were talking about it. And he had undergone a very significant hardship in his family life. But I thought, here his character, he was, one of the most incredibly, had the most positive attitude and work ethic. His character is unassuming, yet he's articulate and engaging. He's very curious about the natural world. I have no reservations in recommending him for admission to top medical schools programs, and I think he'll make an excellent physician. If I talk to someone and I think, wow, I really hope they become my doctor, then I'll put something like that. I really think they're going to be a very good physician. Okay, so that's what's going to happen kind of during the conversation with the professor. And then the next stage is to give instructions to the professor on how to submit the letter of recommendation. So you can write an email. You'll probably want to do this a couple of months in advance to give them plenty of time to write the letter. And so this student has written me, I have attached instructions on how to submit the letter. Thank you once again. This is a letter writing service where the student can register and have letters uploaded by people who he chooses. And what he sends me is this letter it has identifiers, it has a student ID identifier, and then it has a letter identifier. So when I log onto the site to upload the letter, then I just have to put in those two numbers, and it comes up right away for, to submit a letter of recommendation, choose the file and hit submit, and that's all it is. Okay, so once that's done, you will probably get an email notification that the professor has uploaded the letter to the site, and then that's a good time to just follow up with a thank you for having written the letter. I just want to point out that gifts are somewhat awkward in these kinds of situations. I prefer if a student did not give me a gift, but perhaps after you're in a school and you're ready to go, a box of chocolates is okay. But when it's in that letter writing phase, I would discourage you from trying to give the professor gifts. And one thing that's very important to me, and which students usually don't do, is actually let me know what happened to them with their application. So they may get into medical school programs and then they never tell me where they ended up. And to me, I feel kind of saddened by this because, I put this kind of emotional sort of, these feelings and my, wanting to help the student. And then if they never tell me where they went, then, to me, I'm just kind of sad. I want to know where they go. I encourage you to let me know where you go. One way to stay in touch is through the LinkedIn site, which is a very good way for me to kind of follow. I can follow your career, and maybe in the future, we'll have a time to interact again. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is this is kind of more of the meat of this talk is how do you know that the letter I write for you will attest to your best qualities? So for this, I'm going to show a couple of some excerpts from letters, which I would consider to be either from a class or from students working in my lab, which are either extremely strong or those letters where it is more difficult for me to write. And I will tell you, I will never write anything explicitly negative about you. And you'll see in these letters how that works out. I will only say positive things. Okay, so this is a very positive letter. This is a student who is in one of my classes. And there are a couple of parts of this letter that I redacted it so that you wouldn't see the name of the student. But there are a couple of things. So I say, the student has asked me to write this letter. I can do this with my highest level of enthusiasm, okay? So anytime I can write a adjective that's just the, like highest, exceptional, outstanding, best, these are the kinds of words I'd love to put in your letter of recommendation. Okay, so I was her instructor. She finished the class at the very top of a group of 203 students. In fact, there was a significant gap between her and the next top set of students. That means she was head and shoulders above this class with 203 students. And then finally, I say, let's see, I say it somewhere, maybe at the end, that she is, I'll just continue to go through it. As an instructor, it was a pleasure to have her in class. She was not shy to ask questions for clarification, and her questions were always right on the mark. She enhanced the learning experience for all. Okay, so this is a very special individual. I mean, not only was she super bright and capable of taking tests on the material, but she was an intellectual leader in the class. She asked her questions in such a way that it kind of brought the material into a different perspective than perhaps what I presented. And I thought, this is really, her questions were really great for everyone in the class. So, so she has, kind of a leadership quality here that's pretty special and kind of hard to articulate. Okay, so here I say that I'm in contact with over 300 students a year in upper division major classes, and she is among the very top students in terms of overall intelligence and accomplishments that I have encountered over the past X years I have been on the faculty here. Okay, if I can write this about you, this is great, that you are the top student in X number of years to do this. Okay, so think about that. How many years? Now, I can't remember how many years it was, okay? I could be a brand new faculty and, okay, I've been teaching here for 2 years and this is the best student who's been here for 2 years. And that's good and that's fine. But this, the kind of, there's this balance between like how experienced is this faculty and what they can write about you. So if you can be the best student of someone who's worked there 5 years, and it's really good to be that best student, but if you ask an older professor who's been there for 30 years, then it's going to be a little harder to be the best student over a 30-year period of time. So there's a little bit of back and forth there, that how maybe you could make a professor write this question about you. And it also attests too is it's better to have a professor write you a letter who really, really knows you and can write something personal about you. I would suggest that someone like that, even a younger professor, rather than say a Nobel Prize winner who doesn't really know you that well. So that letter is not going to hold a lot of weight. More weight will be held on a letter that, even from a graduate student or a TA or a postdoc, if you have one of those letters of someone who really knows how you think and learn and your curiosity, then that is good. Or have a mix of these types of letters. Okay, so this student I only knew from my class, but I felt like I was able to write a good letter for her. Okay, so the next letter that I'm going to show, the student got a B+ in my class, and I think that what she showed me about herself superseded this issue that she just got a B+, and I couldn't write that she was the top student. But she had a couple of characteristics that, from talking to her and from knowing her, that I felt like I could really accentuate. Okay, so first she took the course. She was introduced to sophisticated concepts and modern molecular biology and genetics. And I often write a little bit about the course that someone has taken. So I say, C was a diligent student who often came to office hours, and I was always impressed by her insightful questions. So during the office hours, I would often have the students come up and answer each other's questions. Actually go up to the board and work through a problem for the other students. And she would do this, and she always did this great job. So she was a great communicator. And so that was something that I could, latch onto. I had a blog for the class. And I told students, I said, if you contribute to this blog, I'll get to know you a little better from your writing. And you'll also help the students in reading material beyond what's in the class. And so she contributed a submission to the blog. She had beautiful writing. She wrote something that was medically relevant, so she has an interest in the medicine. And so I just felt she went that extra step to share her knowledge with the class. Okay, so even though she didn't have the highest grade in the class, I felt like she was able to show me a part of her that I could include in the letter. Okay, so what is the best letter ever that I could write for you? Okay, this is like, I've been here 15 years, and this is a PI letter for someone who, he is in my lab currently, and he's trying to get an MD PhD, so this is the letter. And I don't want to go through the whole letter. I just want to, just give some highlights here, okay? So I say he is the, capital THE, most exceptional undergraduate student I have had work in my lab in 15 years, okay? I've had over 30, maybe 40 students working in my lab, and he is the best. Summer following his freshman year, he was functioning at the level of a second or third year graduate student. He even tutored me in my attempt to learn multivariate calculus as a freshman. It's not his fault that I wasn't that successful in it. I was actually quite busy, but I tried, and he was a great tutor. This was one problem in the research. He couldn't do his studies because our microscope was so antiquated, it didn't have the capabilities of answering the question that he wanted to ask. So he single-handedly rebuilt our imaging station. He made the microscope so that we could take 3D images with different fluorescent markers, and he installed an open source image capturing program. He had to find ways to connect cables to a modern computer to a camera that was 20 years old. There were so many things he overcame to put the system together. And this is a system that has benefited everyone in my lab now, can use this microscope. And he did all this, I think in his sophomore year. Okay, then, his research moved forward. He's presented his work at national and international conferences, even the Biophysical Society in San Francisco. He's been selected to participate in these programs. Oh, yeah, and as an aside, he founded a dental clinic for homeless people in Sacramento. So this is just someone who, this is the letter that you want. Okay, so this is, of course, this person may never sleep. I don't know, but any one of those aspects of that letter, is really, to me, it's just fun to write that letter, and hopefully it will help him. Okay, here's I wouldn't call this the guarded letter. This is just, this is an excerpt from a letter, so it's not the only part of it. But this is where someone really insists, they're from my lab, they've worked in the lab for many years, and it's just very hard for me to, write a lot of positive things. So, so she, was a dishwasher, so for these tasks, she was very conscientious, and we've never had a problem with our reagents that she's prepared. She has an interest in research projects. One lasted for a summer, okay, didn't really take off. She wrote reviews in this independent study thing that we did, and she did a good job. She did a lot of rewrites, and her writing improved, okay? So, if you really if you were in my lab and I am the best person to write a letter and recommendation for you, it's gonna be hard for me. I'm never gonna say anything outright negative about you. But what I will, sometimes I'm just gonna have to write something that I have to say that the admissions committees, they can read between the lines. So that's that kind of letter. Okay, this is from a colleague of mine. This was another person who worked in our lab, and it was clear that this person wanted to work in the lab just to have something on her resume that she did research. Okay, so undergraduate, she participated in our lab meetings and presented her research findings to our group. P's research presentations were clear and well organized. It is clear P understands the experiments and the significance of her findings. Okay, so again, it's not outright negative, but it's not, what you want your letter to say. Okay, so what if you don't have this relationship with your PI? In some cases, it might be better not to find a better, choose a different PI or professor to write your letter. Occasionally, you will ask a professor and they will decline. They will say they cannot write a letter of recommendation for you. In some cases, the professor may be just too busy. And if you ask only a couple of weeks before the letter is due, that is hard. The faculty can reasonably say that they're too busy and they can't write the letter. You should give a couple months outlook before starting this process of working with the professor to do the letter. It may be that the professor feels they don't know you well enough to write a letter or write something positive. Then maybe there's something that you could do to remedy that. Maybe you could do the extra, some independent study with them or something where they can, a chance for them to get to know you better. And you can always try another professor. This is also true with PIs. If you feel like things just aren't working out with your PI, you don't have your own independent project, it's perfectly fine to switch labs and maybe find another lab to work in. Okay, so this comes to my conclusions. I won't read them. I've already talked about them, and I am happy to take any questions from the audience at this point. Okay. Okay, well, thank you for your time.